Hi everyone, today I want to talk about the Barbarians in Season 3. They have received some pretty major buffs and very few nerfs, to be fair, making them pretty clearly the best class coming up in Season 3, yet again. So we just had a dominance of Hoda in Season 2, that was absolutely a crazy build. It was one-shotting everything in the game, and I gotta say they nerfed it very mildly only. I'm very surprised about this. And on top of this, they also decided to just buff everything else on the class through the roof. So one thing in particular that I want to talk about here today is the Unconstrained buff, actually. So if you don't know Unconstrained, this is one of the key passives for Barbarians that increases the Berserking's damage bonus by 60%. It used to be 25%, so that was kind of nothing. Then they buffed it to 60%, and now they it made it to 100%. So if you go here in game right now, basically what happens is that instead of 25% extra damage, you deal 100% extra damage while berserking. Now every single respectable barbarian build is going to be permanently berserking, so that is not a question. And this means that your overall damage output increases in this patch running the Unconstrained passive by around 25% compared to pre-patch. This makes Unconstrained a much more viable option than before, because now it's actually fairly close to, well, the true key passive that Barbs used to have for the last half year, Unbridled Rage. Unbridled Rage says that you get 135% more damage, but your skills cost 100% extra, and it only works for core skills, whereas Unconstrained works for everything. So this makes it pretty viable for example, new charge type builds. It is also just a very good option to play builds that are just too resource hungry. For example, Double Swing. Previously, I played Double Swing with Unbridled Rage, but I think in the future that will no longer be the case, because you're just going to have infinite amount of resources without having to spend like double the resources, basically. It's going to be very easy to sustain, and Unconstrained is just kind of like a way smoother start for the Barbs in general. So you get this like very early, like, you know, level 25 or something with Renown, and you're just gonna run this like all the way to the 100, and you don't have to worry about your gear. You know, you don't have to get those resource generation rolls on your rings like this one, and, you know, some resource aspects perhaps to actually fuel your build. And it's gonna be a much more smooth experience starting very early in the game. But one thing that many people probably don't know is that this buff is actually way bigger than it seems. So the thing is that there is Wrath of the Berserker, and a lot of builds already ran Wrath of the Berserker. Now, when I was testing this, I actually wondered, what about the Supreme of the Berserker upgrade here, where it says that while Wrath of the Berserker is active, every 50 fury you spend increases Berserking's damage bonus by 25% up to 100%. So I was curious what this actually means, because it's not 100% clear. But it turns out, also with some testing from Slothmaster, so shout out to him, that this is actually a multiplicative bonus to the Berserking damage bonus. So what actually happens is that if you have Unconstrained, you're going to get 100% damage bonus, and then you get double of that, and this is going to be your damage bonus. So in total, you're going to deal 300% damage instead of regular damage if you have Berserking plus the Wrath of the Berserking stack. So you deal triple damage, and if you compare this to, for example, Unbridled Rage, we have 2.35, and then we have times 1.5. if you have the regular 25% Berserking doubled with Wrath the Berserker. And that is actually not such a huge difference here. You see there's only a 17.5% damage difference between the Unconstrained passive and the Unbridled Rage passive if you have Wrath the Berserker stacked up. Because with Wrath the Berserker stacked, you get a better benefit out of Unconstrained. But now comes the kicker. You can actually snapshot this buff for the entirety of your Berserking's duration. So basically what happens is that when you are berserking and you press your Wrath of the Berserker and you remain berserking, it will give you this damage buff, even if Wrath of the Berserker has already finished. So it says that Wrath of the Berserker only has 5 seconds uptime, but those 5 seconds are just the time that you have to stack up the buff. And as long as you never let berserking fall off, you will keep that 100% extra bonus. And this means you can have this buff pretty easily permanently up with Unconstrained, because it increases the Berserking's duration by 5 seconds. It's going to be a total of 10 seconds now that you have time to, like, you know, run to the next pack, keep your Berserking bonus up, and you're going to deal this higher damage all the time. It's not just for 5 seconds, it's all the time. And this makes Unconstrained so good in Season 3. And Barbs have many ways of triggering Berserking. So there are stuff on the Paragon, like this Blood Rage node here. So you can do that, for example, just by killing enemies that are bleeding. Double Swing has like Berserking by default, basically, because you just have like infinite Berserking when you do this. You have the War Cry, you have the Wrath of the Berserker sometimes. You have like the brawling skills here. You have the Death Blow there with exposed vulnerability. So it's very easy to kind of just keep going with the Berserking bonus and just never let it fall off. This is exactly how we played, for example, in Path of Exile. Many builds were running this, and I think most people were unaware that this actually is like a permanent bonus compared to just being a 5-second bonus. So what this means in practice is that I totally expect a lot of builds will actually stop running Unbridled Rage, and especially those builds that were already running Wrath the Berserker just because, you know, those triple shout builds or something, they will probably just go Unconstrained now because it's so much easier to keep up this buff and have like a nearly same damage output without having this downside of the 100% extra Fury cost. Now there are also some advantages to spending a lot of Fury. For example, you can get the healing here from Invigorating Fury. You can proc the Ring of Red Furor more easily. So some builds may still want to do that. But if you are ever struggling with your resources, or you know, if you just want to make a different setup that doesn't go so deep in resource recovery, then Unconstrained is a nearly similar option without any downside. It's actually pretty crazy. But the Unconstrained passive is also not the only thing in this patch notes. There is also the buff to Walking Arsenal. Now, you may know that I'm a big fan of Walking Arsenal. This is like the build I've played back in Season 0, the Kratos Barb. That was the original Walking Arsenal build that I made. And that was really cool, and it basically has only gotten better since then. Now even more so. So they made it like much more usable now with a 10 seconds timer, and they buff the damage slightly and give you 20% extra attack speed, because why not? So that is really cool. It makes Walking Arsenal an even better choice. Now the interesting part is it actually gives you exactly the same damage bonus as Unconstrained now as well. So you get 3 separate 10% damage multipliers, and then you get a 20% damage multiplier, giving you 60% damage. And on top of this, you can be Berserking, so 25% extra. And you see this is exactly double damage when you have all the Walking Arsenal bonuses up and the Berserking on top of it, which, you know, is exactly this 100% damage bonus that you get from Unconstrained. So that's actually kind of funny. But on top of this, you also get the 20% attack speed with Walking Arsenal, kind of rewarding you for that investment and, you know, swapping the items all around, like skills all the time. So overall, I expect all 3 of those key passes to be used depending on the build. So I guess Hoda might still keep running with something like Triple Shout, Wrath, and Unbridled Rage, for example, if you want to do that. But you don't have to go for this overpowered shenanigans and Red Furor and all that kind of stuff. You can definitely stick to just a normal setup and, you know, have like leap and charge everywhere, and be extremely mobile as Barb. Barbs in general are going to be just so powerful with those buffs to the key passives, with some of the buffs to charge, for example, and with the really, really mild nerfs to the existing strong builds, that Barbs with basically any of the core skills is going to obliterate. I think the weakest one here might be Whirlwind or Rend, but there are some pretty major buffs to Rend here. But basically, Hammer of the Ancients, Upheaval, Double Swing, all of these are gonna decimate. They're gonna be like, you know, way stronger than other stuff in the game for sure. This is gonna be noticeably boosting the class higher than other classes, basically. And about Gushing Wounds and Rend, we'll see. Right now, I don't trust Gushing Wounds at all, but you don't have to play this. You can just play any of the other key passes if you want. So realistically, you can just play like a charge Rend Barb with some of the new items, for example, like the Ring of the Ravenous here, where you just like charge through enemies, and they apply Rend here for 2 stacks, and it just everything dies behind you, basically. So I think that's kind of like how that playstyle will go, and Gushing Wounds being bugged or not doesn't really matter all too much, because you can just play one of the other key passes and you're gonna be fine. Now for the triple shout builds, Blizzard is trying to break that meta up a little bit, and I think in a pretty interesting way. So instead of like outright nerfing the shouts and all of the synergies, they just changed 2 aspects here. One is the glyph, the martial glyph, and the other is the Echoing Fury. So you can still stack shouts if you want to, but it's like a bit different now, basically. So what this one says here is that now that when you use a shout, every non-shout skill will have its cooldown reduced by 4 seconds instead of other shout skills by 1.2 seconds. So basically, previously you did like 1 shout, And then he did the second shout that reduced the first shout by 1.2 seconds. And then he did the third shout that reduced the first one by 2.4 and the second by 1.2. So this is actually a buff, I would say, to Martial Glyph, funny enough, and kind of incentivizes you to keep those multiple shouts in your build now. However, there's Echoing Fury that has been changed to generating 10 Fury per second while any shout is active instead of 4 per shout. So when you have all 3 active at the same time, it's a slight decrease, but you can just kind of like, cycle them. You do one here, one there, and so on. And, you're going to get your cooldown resets once in a while. You're going to get your Fury. So that's actually extremely powerful now. And potentially shout builds have become even better. Just that you don't want to like stack them all and go all in at one moment. Instead, you want to try to smooth it out a little bit. Maybe use the rallying cry to run through the dungeon, then use a war cry when you find an elite, then use a challenging shout when there's many dangerous affixes going on, and so on. So you want to cycle them a little bit, and you have a bit more of like situational uses, making them a lot more interesting. And at the same time, you can use them to reset your other skills. So you can have a build that has, charge, leap, and 2 shouts, for example. And then you just got to get really mobile. You charge, you shout, you charge again, you leap, you shout again, and you can do all of that again, like back to back to back. And that can be pretty wild. And then comes the buff to charge here. So this is one of the most talked about changes of this entire patch, I guess. The 900% damage buff, literally times 10. For charge. Now you have to know that they also nerfed the aspects for it. So there was veteran brawlers that gave you up to plus 300% bonus, and now that's only a 40% bonus fully stacked. So it's like much more reasonable. But the charge's overall damage and utility has massively improved now because you can reset the cooldown much more easily, and now it actually deals damage for basically any build. It's going to be a huge boon in the early game for Barbs, I think. And you can stick this into anything that doesn't run Unbridled Rage, basically, because Unbridled Rage, again, only buffs the core skills. But if you play Unconstrained, if you play Walking Arsenal, you can definitely run Charge as like a viable damage option now to just like, nuke down an elite or something, and or do some major damage on like your engagement, basically. Or even with a Gushing Wounds Rend playstyle, that might actually work out as well. However, then it's just mostly a support skill, just to apply the Rend Bleed from the new unique. But overall, I think there's definitely reason to be excited about Charge. There can be like a pure Charge build if you have like enough cooldown resets that is actually feasible. Or otherwise you have like just Charge as like an extra tool in there. For example, on a double swing build that I played back in Season 2, I'm going to be doing that again in Season 3 as my racing build actually for the world first. And that is definitely including Charge. And we'll see how strong it will actually perform, but I actually think pretty well. I've already been testing and fear crafting builds for Barbarian in Season 3. I'm definitely excited to play the class more. I'm very surprised that, they just kept this power level of Barbs so high as it was before almost, and they only like very slightly tweaked down some things and then buffed a lot of other things through the roof here. So you can definitely expect good things from Barbs. I'm going to be there to cover it. I'm going to be showing you my double swing build very soon, so stay tuned for that. And for now, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.